Here is the hotel acquisition model from Tilt Analytics. So this is the model you want when you're buying an existing operating hotel. If you've seen the other model videos on the website, you'll recognize the structure of the tool. All the inputs are on one page, the input sheet. All of the input sections are categorized at the top, and all of the input categories are hyperlinked. And so if I just want to go to the loan, I can hyperlink there and I'm at the acquisition loan. Similarly, all of the other sheets in the model are output reports, and all of those can be found in the table of contents. They're all hyperlinked. We'll see if I want to go to my deal summary, go there. All of the sheets are set up already for printing to PDF. Let's take a quick look at some of them. The LP cash flow sheet shows very clearly what the LPs put in for cash and when, what their fees are, preferred return, return of capital distributions, IRR, multiple, profit, payback period, and so on. I can see all of the same information that I see annually here. I can scroll over and see it quarterly and monthly. Same sheet for the GP. My cash in, cash out sheet shows me all of the project cash in and then all the project cash out before distributions to equity and then payouts to equity below. Again, all the information is annual, but if I scroll over to the right, I can see the same information monthly. The banks want to see your cash flow from operations, so they're going to want to see revenues, expenses, debt service, and a variety of key metrics at the bottom. There's a return breakdown comparing LP and GP, some summary analysis I use to quickly assess why projects are healthy or not healthy. Of course, you have a hotel P&L, quite detailed. This is the more full version, gives you every line item. The model also comes pre-equipped with what-if scenarios in the form of sensitivity tables. We see here, for example, what if your exit valuation is different than what you think? What if the purchase price, revenues, and so on? There are also what-if scenarios around what if you sold the property in any given year? And the interesting thing here is that a lot of times your investors will have a preference between IRR and multiple. They tend to move in opposite directions the longer you hold the property. And so you can tailor your plan to the investors that you're partnering with accordingly. There's a nice detailed sheet showing how the waterfall calculations work. And there's also extensive charting on the project for visual displays of information. LP cash, put their money in. There's earnings from NOI, then an exit. Break even, this is cash into the project, this is cash out of the project. NOI, and so on. And so that's a quick look at the output reports. Let's see how using the tool works on inputting a project. So you'll see that all of the input categories are, for the most part, pretty self-evident. I mean, the blue cells are your inputs. You input the project name and so on, some information, the date that you're going to acquire the place, what are you going to pay for it, closing costs. You can have a hotel renovation, your date, how long does it last, what's the duration, what are your line item costs and amounts for the renovation. And I can also tell the model that during the renovation, we're going to assume a 20% hit to the revenues, only a 5% reduction in the operating expenses. So if I, for hypothetical purposes, if I had a 100-key hotel, I can input my historical data in whatever sort of format I want. I can just call this going to be my T12 and so on. I can have this for reference. Here's my inputs on my operating performance for the property. And so I can say, look, I'm just going to assume a 75% OCC every year. I think this year's ADR is going to be 325, and I'm going to grow at 4% a year. I can have other departments such as F&B, minibar, public room rent, whatever I want. And you'll notice I have a variety of options on the toggle drop-down for how to tell the model you want to do projections on what your revenues or expenses are going to be to make your inputting really quite easy. And so I can say, look, F&B, I think that's going to be 30% of rooms revenue. So that's just going to scale with rooms revenue. Or I can say minibar, brought in a bunch of money one year, and then I'm just going to say make that the same percent of rooms revenue as this amount from the reference year. My reference year comes from inputting, say, a reference point OCC and ADR, and model knows your reference rooms revenue. I just randomly use different methods here to showcase them, but I could say public room rent might be dollars per available room, dollar per occupied room, or I can just say I'm just going to input the dollar amount for the whole year. And then on departmental expense, typically I'm using percent of departmental revenue as my input method, but you can also do a dollar input if you prefer. Undistributed, I've got a few examples of undistributed expenses here. For the most part, I'm just going to use dollar input for this example. Same with my fixed expenses, insurance and taxes, go out each year. And you see that even though these are inputs, I can put formulas in the cell, of course, right? So I just made this formula be, increase at 3% each year. And then lastly, I can have management fees and FF&E reserve, percent of total revenue for the FF&E, for example, and so on. And it's up top will be a summary of my performance. I can see my expense ratios and my sums for each of my departmental, or at least each of my operating categories. Summary breakdown as you go along, just for reference. I'll tell the model, when do I plan on selling this place? Well, let's say we sell in December of 2032. That's about 7 years of hold period of operating. Let's just say it's a 5% cap rate, the equivalent of a 20x on earnings. Forward 12-month NOI, $10 million. Valuation, $200 million. Closing costs and brokerage. On my acquisition loan, I can input a dollar amount or a DSCR. I'm just going to say, well, I want to do percent LTV. I'm going to say the loan's going to be 70% of the acquisition cost, and they're going to lend 50% toward the renovation in my example. And I could say, okay, look, I'm going to be a 25-year RAM, no interest only, 7% interest rate with a 0.5 point origination fee. Here's my acquisition loan amortization table right here for reference. The model can do mezz debt, grants. On the equity side, I can tell the model different ways of saying how much the LP or the GP put in respectively on a percentage basis or a dollar basis. The model determines how much total equity you're going to need based on all the other inputs in the model. So you don't input equity directly, it solves it for you. And I can say in this case, I'm just going to have the LP put in 90% of the money, so they're putting in $34 million. I'm going to say we're just going to recognize it based on project drawdowns, or I can say, no, the investor is going to require that we calculate IRR and so on from the upfront from day one. There's a variety of fees you can charge the LP. I can say like the acquisition fee, and that's gonna come directly from the LP paid to the GP, for example. Whereas, say, a management fee of effective gross income is actually going to reduce cash available for distributions to both parties because it comes off the top before equity splits. Some summary uses and sources. I can say we're going to do a refinance in 2028 in January with a 1% closing cost. I'm going to say a 6% rate. Make this just like the exit cap, say an exit cap of 5% at the refi. Get 6 months of interest only, or a 25-year AM. And the model tells us at that time we have a $75 million acquisition loan outstanding. So we need a 45% LTV to pay it off. I'm going to say, well, okay, let's do a 60% LTV, but we're starting to see that might run into DSCR problems. If I say I can do the lowest I can go on DSCR is a 1.2, that translates to a 53% LTV. So I'm actually going to come back here and make this 60, a 50% LTV. And now I've got DSCR that's safer. The loan is an $85 million loan, and after paying off the first loan, it puts $9 million in the equity pocket. And then we're talking about how to split profits between the LP and the GP. I can give the LP a 6% interest rate style preferred return that accrues until the cash is available to pay it. On the return of capital, I can say, well, we're going to do the LP first. I'm going to say, no, the LP, GP, everybody's money is as good as everybody else's. I'm going to do a return of capital, pari passu, simultaneous. And then splits on profits after return of capital, I can just do a fixed split, for example, or I can do a waterfall. So if we do a waterfall, I can say, all right, well, pari passu until an 8% IRR. Between an 8 and a 12, it's going to be 80-20. Between 12 and 15, be 70-30. And everything after that's 50-50. So I can come over here and I can see the comparison of the LP right next to the GP, that there's $38 million of equity cash contribution. The cash available for the equity holders, $143 million in my little hypothetical project. Preferred return is $13 million to the LP, then return of capital, pari passu, and then it shows splits at each tier in the waterfall, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then 50-50 at tier 5. So the LPIR, 19%, multiple in cash contributions of 3x. And then furthermore, the last section we can do is we can assign the LP team with up to 6 individual LPs who put in a certain amount of money, or potentially they get credited with non-cash contribution, for example. So if on the GP side, maybe we've got a GP partner and they're going to get recognized for an additional, say, $25K of non-cash contribution. Maybe they personally co-sign on a loan or something, and they're going to get some equity credit for that. When I say, well, let's give them return of capital on that as if they put in cash, but this partner is not going to get any of the fees coming from the LP. This other GP partner, so I could say here, say partner 2, is going to put in all of the cash on the project, and then, but is not going to receive any non-cash contribution, but is going to receive 100% of the GP fees. And so then the model knows how to break apart the individual LPs and individual GPs from what we input in this section. And then once you've completed that, you're at the end. And so then it's just a matter of, coming into the project, the output reports, and assessing how the project, performed. So that's a quick look at the hotel acquisition model from Tilt.